What happens when a country music superstar's carefully crafted public image crumbles in real time on live television? What happens when years of built-up frustration explode during what should have been a routine morning show interview? Today, we're diving into one of the most shocking moments in recent television history, when Blake Shelton completely lost his composure on Good Morning America, turning a simple promotional interview into an absolute train wreck that had viewers glued to their screens. If you think you've seen celebrity meltdowns before, wait until you hear what actually went down in that studio. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this story is about to take some wild turns that nobody saw coming. The morning started like any other for the Good Morning America team. Blake Shelton was scheduled for a standard 7-minute segment to promote his upcoming tour and talk about his latest album. What nobody expected was that George Stephanopoulos had done his homework, and not just on Blake's music career. The veteran journalist had been digging into some recent controversies surrounding the country star, and he wasn't planning to let this interview pass without addressing them. "Good morning, Blake. Thanks for joining us today," George said with his trademark professional smile as the cameras rolled live across America. Blake, looking relaxed in his signature plaid shirt and cowboy boots, leaned back in the studio chair with that familiar Oklahoma charm. "Morning, George. Happy to be here. Always love coming on the show," Blake replied, flashing his crooked grin to the cameras. But George wasn't interested in pleasantries today. "Now, Blake, obviously, we want to talk about your new music, but I have to ask about some comments you made recently about the music industry. You said that, quote, 'Nashville has lost its soul, and that most of today's country artists are just pop stars in cowboy hats.' That's caused quite a stir in the country music community." Blake's smile faltered slightly. This wasn't the softball question he was expecting. "Well, George, I think if you look at the context of that interview, I was talking about authenticity in music. I've always been someone who speaks his mind about what real country music should sound like. But Blake, critics are pointing out that you yourself have incorporated pop elements into your recent albums. Some are calling it hypocritical. How do you respond to that?" George pressed, his journalistic instincts taking over. The tension in the studio was immediately palpable. Blake shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his jaw tightening just slightly. "Look, George, there's a big difference between evolving your sound and completely abandoning your roots. I think anyone who's listened to my music over the years knows where I stand." "Fair enough. But let's talk about your role as a coach on The Voice. There have been allegations from former contestants that the show manipulates results and that coaches sometimes play favorites based on factors other than talent. What's your take on those claims?" This was clearly not going the direction Blake had anticipated. His media handler, sitting just off camera, was already looking nervous. Blake's trademark laid-back demeanor was starting to crack. "George, I think you're talking about disgruntled contestants who didn't win. That happens on every competition show. The Voice has always been about finding the best talent. Period. I've worked with incredible artists from all backgrounds. But there are specific allegations, Blake. Former contestant Maria Rodriguez claimed that you told her she needed to, quote, 'sex up her image' if she wanted to make it to the finals. She says you made inappropriate comments about her appearance during rehearsals. How do you respond to that?" The studio fell silent except for the hum of the cameras. Blake's face had gone from relaxed to visibly agitated in a matter of seconds. His hands gripped the arms of his chair, and viewers at home could see the color rising in his cheeks. "That is absolutely not true. George, I have never, and I mean never, made inappropriate comments to any contestant. Maria Rodriguez is making things up because she's bitter about not winning. This is exactly the kind of garbage journalism that's destroying this country." George remained calm but persistent. "Blake, she's not the only one. We've spoken to 3 other former contestants who corroborate similar experiences. They're willing to go on record with their allegations." "This is unbelievable," Blake snapped, his voice rising noticeably. "You invite me on here to talk about my music, my tour, and instead you're ambushing me with lies and made-up stories. This is why people don't trust the media anymore, George. This right here. Blake, these are serious allegations that deserve to be addressed, especially given your platform and influence in the industry. Don't you think your fans deserve to hear your side of the story?" "My side?" Blake's voice was getting louder, his Oklahoma accent thickening with anger. "My side is that this is complete nonsense. I've spent 20 years building my career helping young artists, and now you're sitting here trying to tear me down with gossip and hearsay. Where's your proof, George?" Where are the recordings? The witnesses? George, ever the professional, maintained his composure despite Blake's escalating agitation. We have testimony from multiple sources. Blake, these women came forward independently without knowledge of each other's claims. That's typically seen as credible evidence in journalism. Credible evidence? Blake was now leaning forward aggressively in his chair. Testimony from bitter contestants who didn't get what they wanted. That's your credible evidence? You know what, George? I think we're done here. But George wasn't backing down. Blake, there's also the matter of your recent business dealings. Your restaurant chain has been accused of labor violations in 3 states. Workers are claiming unsafe conditions and wage theft. Your company has settled 2 of those cases out of court. Can you comment on that? Blake's face was now visibly red, his hands clenched into fists. Are you kidding me right now? You've got to be kidding me. I come on this show in good faith as a guest, and you're just going to keep throwing accusations at me like I'm some kind of criminal. I'm asking legitimate questions about legitimate concerns, Blake. That's what journalists do. Legitimate? Blake's voice cracked slightly with anger. You call this ambush journalism legitimate? This is a hit job, George, and everyone watching knows it. You've made up your mind about me before I even walked in here. The interview had completely derailed from its intended purpose. Viewers across the country were witnessing something unprecedented. A complete meltdown happening in real time on live television. Blake's carefully maintained public persona was crumbling with each passing second. And George Stephanopoulos showed no signs of letting up on his line of questioning. What happened next shocked everyone in the studio. Blake stood up abruptly from his chair, his microphone still clipped to his shirt, the cords stretching as he paced behind his seat. The camera operators scrambled to adjust their angles to keep him in frame, while the show's producers frantically gestured from behind the cameras. You know what your problem is, George? You think because you worked in politics and now you're on television that gives you the right to destroy people's lives with your gotcha questions? Well, let me tell you something. I'm not some politician you can corner with your Washington tactics. George remained seated, his hands folded calmly on his desk, but his eyes never left Blake. Blake, I think you should sit back down. We can have a civil conversation about these issues. Civil? Blake let out a harsh laugh that echoed through the studio. You call this civil? You invite me here under false pretenses, then spend 10 minutes trying to destroy my reputation. And you want me to be civil about it? That's rich, George. That's really rich. These are questions that needed to be asked, Blake. You're a public figure with significant influence. When allegations surface, the public has a right to know. Blake spun around to face George directly, his face flushed with anger. The public has a right to know? The public has a right to hear lies and unsubstantiated garbage? Is that what you call journalism now? Because where I come from, we call that something else entirely. The tension in the studio was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The Good Morning America crew had never seen anything like this during a live broadcast. Blake's publicist had moved closer to the set, clearly debating whether to intervene, while George's producers were signaling frantically from the control room. Blake, I understand you're upset, but these allegations come from credible sources. Maria Rodriguez isn't some random person making things up. She's a respected vocalist who appeared on your show for 8 weeks. Respected? Blake's voice dripped with sarcasm. Maria Rodriguez couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, George. She lasted as long as she did because the producers thought she had a good sob story, not because she could sing. And now she's trying to cash in on the Me Too movement by making up lies about me. George's eyebrows raised slightly at that comment. Blake, are you suggesting that women who come forward with allegations of inappropriate behavior are just trying to cash in? I'm suggesting that some people will say anything for their 15 minutes of fame, especially when they didn't get what they thought they deserved. Maria Rodriguez thought she was going to win The Voice, and when she didn't, she went looking for someone to blame. But what about the other contestants who've made similar claims? Are they all just seeking fame, too? Blake was now pacing back and forth behind his chair like a caged animal. I don't know what game you're playing here, George, but I'm not going to sit here and let you destroy 20 years of hard work based on the word of a bunch of wannabe singers who couldn't make it in the music business. Blake, these aren't wannabe singers. These are women who trusted you as their mentor and coach. If what they're saying is true, that's a serious abuse of power. If what they're saying is true, Blake stopped pacing and stared directly at George. There's your problem right there. If you don't know if it's true, but you're treating me like I'm already guilty. Whatever happened to innocent until proven guilty in this country? George leaned forward slightly, his journalist instincts fully engaged. Blake, the burden of proof is different in journalism than it is in a courtroom. When multiple independent sources tell the same story, that's newsworthy. Multiple sources? Blake repeated mockingly. Let me ask you something, George. Did you verify these sources? Did you do any actual investigating? Or did you just take their word for it because it made for good television? We conducted thorough interviews with each woman. Their stories are consistent and detailed. Consistent and detailed? Blake said, his voice getting louder again. Of course they're consistent. You think these women didn't talk to each other before they came to you? You think they didn't coordinate their stories to make sure they all lined up? The interview had completely spiraled out of control. Blake, are you suggesting there's some kind of conspiracy among these women to falsely accuse you? I'm suggesting that you're a fool if you think people don't coordinate their lies, especially when there's money and attention involved. These women saw an opportunity to take down a successful man, and you gave them the platform to do it. George's voice remained steady, but there was a slight edge to it. Now, that's a pretty cynical view of women who say they've been victimized, Blake. Victimized? Blake's laugh was bitter and angry. The only victim here is me, George. I'm the one being victimized by your hit job journalism and their made-up stories. But I guess that doesn't matter because I'm a successful white man from Oklahoma, right? I'm an easy target. Blake, this isn't about your race or gender or where you're from. This is about accountability. Accountability? Blake was shouting now, his voice echoing off the studio walls. You want to talk about accountability? How about you be accountable for the damage you're doing to my reputation right now? How about you be accountable for destroying my career based on lies and rumors? The show's director was frantically trying to figure out how to handle the situation. They couldn't cut to commercial during a live broadcast, and Blake showed no signs of calming down. If anything, he was getting more agitated by the second. Blake, nobody wants to destroy your career, but if there are serious allegations, they need to be addressed. Serious allegations? Blake repeated, shaking his head in disgust. You know what's serious, George? What's serious is that you've already made up your mind about me. You've already decided I'm guilty, and nothing I say here is going to change that. That's not true, Blake. I'm giving you the opportunity to respond to these claims. Opportunity? Blake's voice cracked with rage. This isn't an opportunity. This is an execution. You brought me here to publicly humiliate me, and you're doing a damn good job of it. George finally showed a slight crack in his professional demeanor. Blake, if you're innocent of these allegations, then defending yourself shouldn't be this difficult. That comment hit Blake like a slap in the face. He stopped pacing and stared at George with a look of pure fury. Are you serious right now? Are you actually serious? You ambush me with unproven allegations on live television, and when I get upset about it, you use that as evidence that I'm guilty. The studio had gone completely silent except for Blake's heavy breathing and the hum of the cameras. Everyone present knew they were witnessing television history, but not the kind anyone wanted to be part of. Blake looked like he was about to completely lose control, and George sat there with the calm confidence of a journalist who knew he had his subject exactly where he wanted him. What happened next will go down as one of the most shocking moments in live television history. Blake's face had gone from red to almost purple with rage, and his hands were shaking as he pointed directly at George. You know what, George? I've had enough of this. I've had enough of you. I've had enough of this network, and I've had enough of this whole corrupt system that lets people like you destroy innocent people for ratings. George remained remarkably calm, which only seemed to infuriate Blake more. Blake, I think you need to take a breath and collect yourself. Collect myself? Blake's voice was now hoarse from shouting. You spend 15 minutes trying to ruin my life on national television, and you want me to collect myself? Here's me collecting myself, George. Blake reached down and ripped the microphone off his shirt. The sound of the clip breaking echoed through the studio. He threw it down on the floor with such force that it bounced twice before coming to rest near George's feet. There. How's that for collecting myself? The camera operators didn't know where to look. Blake was standing there breathing heavily, sweat visible on his forehead, while George sat calmly at his desk, professional as ever, despite the chaos unfolding around him. Blake, I understand you're frustrated, but this kind of behavior isn't helping your case. My case? Blake let out a sound that was part laugh, part growl. I don't have a case, George. I have a life that you just tried to destroy on live television. But you know what? I'm not going down without a fight. Blake walked around the chair and moved closer to George's desk. Close enough that the cameras had to adjust to keep both men in frame. You want to know the truth about those contestants? You want to know what really happened? George's eyes narrowed slightly. I'm listening. The truth is that Maria Rodriguez couldn't handle criticism. Every time I tried to help her improve her performance, she took it personally. And when she got eliminated, she went crying to anyone who would listen. That it wasn't fair, that she deserved to win. That doesn't address her specific allegations about inappropriate comments. Blake slammed his hand down on George's desk with such force that the coffee mug jumped and spilled. Because there were no inappropriate comments. The only thing inappropriate here is this ambush interview disguised as journalism. George looked down at the coffee spreading across his desk, then back up at Blake with a slight frown. Blake, you need to step back. I need to step back? Blake's voice was getting shriller. You just spent 20 minutes destroying my reputation, and you're telling me to step back? How about you step back from this witch hunt you're conducting? The show's security team was now visible in the background, clearly debating whether they needed to intervene. Blake's publicist had moved even closer to the set, her face pale with horror at what was unfolding. Blake, let's talk about the restaurant allegations. Your company settled those cases. Doesn't that suggest there was merit to the claims? We settled because it was cheaper than fighting frivolous lawsuits, George. You know how the legal system works. Sometimes it's easier to pay people to go away than to spend millions fighting lies. But your former employees are saying the working conditions were dangerous, that people were getting hurt. My employees? You mean the people who were happy to work there until they saw an opportunity to cash in? You mean the people who signed contracts and knew exactly what the job entailed? Blake, worker safety isn't negotiable, regardless of contracts. Worker safety? Blake was now shouting at the top of his lungs, his voice echoing through the entire studio. You want to lecture me about worker safety? How about the safety of my reputation? How about the safety of my family who has to watch this character assassination on live television? George's professional mask was starting to slip. The intensity of Blake's meltdown was unlike anything he'd encountered in decades of journalism. Blake, your family doesn't have to endure anything if these allegations are false. If they're false. Blake's eyes were wild now, darting between George and the cameras. There's that word again, if. You've already convicted me in the court of public opinion, George. You and your network have already decided I'm guilty. We're reporting on allegations that have been made. That's what news organizations do. You know what news organizations used to do, George? They used to verify their sources. They used to check facts. They used to have integrity. Blake, I need you to step back right now, George said firmly, his voice finally showing tension. Or what? You'll call security? You'll have me arrested on live television? That would be the perfect ending to your hit piece, wouldn't it? The tension in the studio was now at a breaking point. Everyone present could feel that this was about to escalate beyond just verbal confrontation. Blake was clearly spiraling out of control, and George was starting to look genuinely concerned for his own safety. Blake, this interview is over. I think you need to leave. Oh, now you want me to leave? After you got everything you wanted? After you destroyed me on live television, now you're done with me? Blake turned toward the main camera, addressing the audience directly for the first time. You want to know the real story, America? The real story is that successful people are targets in this country. The real story is that jealous, bitter people can make up any lie they want, and the media will believe them as long as it gets ratings. George tried to regain control of the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll have more Good Morning America. Don't you dare cut away from this, George. Don't you dare hide behind a commercial break after what you just did. But the show's director had heard enough. The camera started pulling back, preparing to cut to commercial, which only infuriated Blake more. That's right, America. This is how it works. They destroy you on live television. Then they cut to commercial and pretend nothing happened. This is your media, folks. This is the journalism you trust. Blake was now addressing multiple cameras as they moved around him, his voice becoming more and more unhinged. They ambush you. They attack you with lies. And when you defend yourself, they act like you're the problem. Security had reached the set now. Two large men in suits positioning themselves near Blake, but not yet touching him. George had stood up from his desk, clearly ready to leave if necessary. You want accountability, George? Here's some accountability for you. I'll see you in court. I'll see your network in court. And when I'm done with you, everyone will know what kind of journalist you really are." Blake turned back toward George one final time, his face contorted with rage. 20 years I've been in this business, George. 20 years of helping people, of entertaining families, of being a good person, and you destroyed it all in 20 minutes for your ratings." With that, Blake stormed off the set, pushing past security and leaving George standing there looking shell-shocked. The cameras finally cut to commercial, but not before capturing one last image of the chaos Blake had left behind. The broken microphone on the floor, the spilled coffee on the desk, and a studio full of people who had just witnessed something that would be talked about for years to come. The country music world, the television industry, and social media would be buzzing about this meltdown for months. Blake Shelton had just committed career suicide on live television, and everyone knew it. What did you think about this explosive confrontation? Have you ever seen a celebrity meltdown this spectacular on live TV? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more shocking celebrity stories that you won't believe actually happened.